Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started, I'm going to give all glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honor goes to the apostles and elders at Great Millstone who teach people well. Peace and salutations to the Lord's elect and the 1/3. Shalom to the 12 tribes of Israel, which includes you Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, and you Israelite foreigners. Lord willing, this will be another edifying lesson. And the topic of this lesson is going to be about don't judge by appearance, right? This is not a black-only Hebrew Israelite thing, right? There's no such thing as the term black. It's a classification of skin color, right? But now people are starting to wake up that, the term black was invented by Johann Bubenblock, right? Back in the 17 and 1800s, right? The term black people didn't even exist, right? That's actually that term goes back to actually having a bad connotation towards it, right? So that's why you have words like black magic, black mirror, all sorts of things, right? Because they were trying to make us, Jake, look bad, right? They were trying to make us look bad. While these people, Esau, he was trying to make us forget our identity, right? So over time, and before I get started, our forefathers were so-called black, right? We were dark-skinned, right? So-called black men, right? Because we were Israelites, right? And over time, what happened was, some of us, we kept our melanin, right? Some of us, started looking like the heathen, and that was actually a part of a curse, because we were going to be scattered among the heathen, right? And this is not a appearance thing, right? This is not like you look at somebody, because there can be black Israelites, and there can be black Edomites, there can be black Moabites, right? You cannot just judge solely off of skin color. We have to go by the Spirit, right? And so I put up some examples of some Israelites, right? And as you can see, we can have some examples of people, people in the world, people. So you have the first guy, you have Cameron Boyce, actor, right? This man's a Jake, and you can see, his father, right? But he ended up looking like almost, a completely, like a white boy, right? He by his spirit, this guy was a good actor, right? He was, he was in a lot of shows, we used to watch growing up, right? And you can tell by this guy, he had a lot of salt, for sure, right? You have the football player or soccer player Cole Palmer. That's, I believe, his grandfather. He's in the picture in the middle of the screen. And you have Blake Griffith, right, and his son, right, who Blake Griffith, I believe he's a Levite. Which goes to show you, man, over time, we're not gonna look so-called black, right? We're not gonna only keep that same skin color, but a lot of people have this doctrine where, very stupid doctrine, to be honest, of, you have to have that black skin color to be an Israelite, or, you lose your seed, right? Which is not scriptural at all. That's fucking nonsense. I don't know where they get that from. The only thing that matters is, your seed line, whether it goes back to Jacob, right? If your seed line goes to that, back to Jacob, man, you are an Israelite, no matter your skin color, no matter if you look black, white, Chinese, and, a lot of countries, man, a lot of countries you won't expect there's a lot of Israelites or a lot of Jake living there, right? You got the Philippines, right? You have China, Russia. The person who actually, I believe, who created the foundations of Russian poetry, he was a so-called black man, right? You have Irish, you have people in Italy, Sicily. You have people in what else, man? Japan, right? Even some of these so-called ish people, some of them are Jakes, man. Some of them are Jakes, small, amount of them, because their women are secretly got with Jake, right? And that goes back to a lot of ancient history, right? And so I have some more examples on the bottom. You got the Moorish head, which the Moors were conquering islands, in Sicily, right? You have I believe it was these Spanish countries, right? You have all across northern Africa, right? You have Bruce Lee, right, who was an Israelite, because he has all that he had a lot of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, which I believe he took some of it from the scriptures, right, you know, and you know, and you have some pictures, of ancient church relics, which show black angels, right, so-called black angels, right. You have a lot of examples, right. You know, you have I also have a screenshot of black Chinese, right. You have black samurais in Japan. This is not appearance thing, right. And we're gonna bring some scriptures out just to prove it. It says right here in the book of 1 Samuel 16:7. It says, "But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I refused him." Right? "For the Lord seeth not as a man seeth, for a man looketh at the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh unto the heart." Right? Talking about King David. A lot of people, underestimated King David, the way he looked, right? And it goes to show you right here, the Lord doesn't look on the outward man's appearance. Mankind looks on your stature, right? Whether you're disabled, right? Your skin color, right? Now obviously there's some things that come into play. There's some certain roles that are you're not allowed to have certain blemishes, and but that's not the point where I'm trying to make. Man, Yahweh Hashem Yahshua, he's not judging based off solely your outward appearance. We have to go by the spirit of the person, right? Because the Lord is the one who puts that spirit into the person, right? The Lord is the one who knows, not man, right? And we have the book of John, chapter 7:24. It says, "Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment." Right? Judge righteous judgment. And how can we do that? Through the Spirit, right? The same way, people were mocking Yahweh Shai, right? When he was on this earth, they were, saying, you can't do miracles, or, you're not you're not the, Son of Man, right? You're not the Messiah, right? The same way, we're gonna get mocked, man. We're gonna get, people are gonna see, who is this guy claiming to be Jacob? Who is this guy? Does he really think he's an Israelite? Does he think this guy is not Yasharel, right? This guy is not Israel, right? Which is complete foolishness, man. You people aren't spiritual, We are the Israelites, right? And ultimately, they just never want to admit that, that Jake was going and sleeping with the heathen woman, right? A lot of people are pretty butthurt about that, right? They're pretty mad that we were because we would take on these, we would when Jake would conquer these lands, we would be taking, these women, right? And, they would be looking at us, they would be seeing that, we have better attributes, than the rest of these people around, right? Yeah, as you can see in that painting that I put, that I put in the first part of the video, right? So it says here, white people did not exist before 1681, right? 1681. Before they didn't have black people, white people, right? They weren't saying, they started making classifications, right? Trying to give us certain people certain identities, right? Which is, we're gonna go back to calling people by their biblical identity soon. We're gonna go back to calling people, this guy's an Edomite, this guy's an Israelite, which we're already doing, right? This guy's a, Ishmaelite, this guy's Elam, right? So we're gonna go back to calling people by their biblical identity, right? This book of Deuteronomy 4:27. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. Right? So we were among the heathen, which, over time we started looking like the heathen. Started taking on the customs, the appearance of the heathen, right? Started taking the customs of the heathen, right? You got, Jake, you leave him, Jake, in China for 8 months. He start getting a woman pregnant, right? He start speaking Chinese, right? He start, wearing what Chinese people wear, So we got a lot of examples, right? In the Philippines, right? A lot of these Filipino people are Jakes, man. Irish people, places you would not expect, right? Because, a lot of people have a very low understanding, they only look at, a man's skin color and say, oh, this guy's, what does this guy think he is? Very foolish, low level, low intellectual, and really what it is spiritual understanding, right? As we read in the scriptures before, the Lord, he doesn't look at just the outward appearance, all the time, right? That's not how things work, right? We're gonna be, a lot of us are gonna be waking up, and as you can see in the examples I showed, we're not gonna come out over time. We don't come out looking like, your everyday, we don't come out looking like LeBron James, right? We don't come out looking like, Wesley Snipes, Will Smith. We don't come out looking like that all the time, right? We're gonna come out looking like, the so-called white man, right? The so-called Chinese man, right? So that's pretty much all I got to say. This is, judge not according to appearance, man. If you believe you're an Israelite, if you have, have you received this truth, man, you are an Israelite, right? With that, I'm going to give all praises, honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to apostles and elders at GMS who taught me this truth. Peace and salutations to the Lord's elect and the 1/3. Shalom.